What is your message to the people of the United States, President?
To unite for the peace of the continent. No more endless wars, no more unjust wars, no more Libya, no more Afghanistan.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We've got a couple of very important stories to talk to you about today. The first being Venezuela. Maduro is feeling the pressure. He is feeling the pressure, and he's understanding that the change in the country is inevitable. And this is the message that he sent to the American people, because right now I think he's trying anything that he can to de-escalate the situation with President Trump. I don't think it's going to work. But listen to what he said to the American people.
All right, this morning is CNN exclusive. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro with a message for Americans as President Trump mulls potential military action inside Venezuela. CNN contributor Stefano Pozzebon is in Caracas with the latest. Good morning, Stefano.
Yes, good morning. I think that the value of the exchange that we had with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro yesterday here in Caracas is not on the message that he said, not what he said, because we have heard this type of speech, these messages of peace towards the United States before, but it's the fact that he was out on the street and surrounded, quite frankly, regular people, regular Venezuelans and the supporters of his government. The exchange was in a march just outside the Miraflores presidential palace. I was able to ask him what is his message for President Trump. Take a listen.
What is your message to the people of the United States, President?
To unite for the peace of the continent. No more endless wars, no more unjust wars, no more Libya, no more Afghanistan.
Do you have a message for President Trump?
My message is yes, peace. Yes, peace.
His message is peace. Maduro's message to America is peace. How can he talk about peace when he jails political opponents? How can he talk about peace when he's murdered thousands of Venezuelans? How can he talk about peace when he's preventing the will of the people to be done in Venezuela? What the people of Venezuela want is very clear. They want to be free from tyranny. They want to be free from political persecution. They want to be the rich Venezuela that was great for everybody that lived there. So previously, I brought you guys some insight from people that are on the ground in Venezuela and what they believe needs to happen there. Let's listen to Leopoldo Lopez, who was imprisoned for 7 years just for his political beliefs. Listen to what he had to say.
Opposition leader who was imprisoned under Nicolás Maduro's regime. He escaped and now lives in exile in Spain. Welcome to DW. Let's start with your view of this American intimidation of Venezuela.
Well, I would say that what's very clear is that this is not against Venezuela. We need to make this very clear. It's against a criminal structure that Maduro leads. Venezuelans are very clear that Nicolás Maduro for years have been the head of a criminal organization that traffics cocaine, that has been exploiting the resources of Venezuela, has been contrabanding, and it's illegitimate. For us Venezuelans, Maduro is not the legitimate president. He lost an election. Edmundo González Urrutia won the election with 70% of the vote, with all of the odds against in an autocratic regime.
So let's talk about a couple of key phrases that he mentioned, right? The first is that this is not about the Venezuelan people. This is about Maduro. The second is that the legitimate leader is not in power right now. It was an overwhelming mandate by the Venezuelan people to remove Maduro from power, but he still clings on to that power. Now, later in the interview, Leopoldo's asked about what would happen if the United States goes in there, intervenes, and then a military coup occurs. You know, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And the reason I don't think it's going to be an issue is because if the opposition leader would have won by 50-something percent, 60%, but that's not the case. An overwhelming majority of Venezuelans elected for him. That means that they will fight to get him in power. So I don't think the military coup that they're talking about in the media, that everybody's kind of bringing up, may happen. I don't think that's going to be the case in Venezuela. The Venezuelan people are ready to be free right now. And to ensure the freedom of the Venezuelan people, to ensure that freedom is met, that freedom is accomplished, the United States will continue its buildup in the region. So President Trump was briefed on potential land strikes. Look, I know there are a lot of people that are spazzing out about this. Well, the president is being briefed. Now we've got, a military strategy to go in there, ground forces blazing, guns blazing. No. The United States has plans to invade every country in the world. We have war plans for every country, every contingency. That's just the norm. The fact that the president was being briefed is not really outside of the norm. He's being provided his options by the military experts just in case he does decide to strike. So here's a little more on those potential strikes.
To regime change. I mean, there's a lot going on here.
This is what Zach Cohen and Kevin Liptak and I are told, and that is that the president was briefed this week on multiple military options for Venezuela, up to and including strikes on land, and including not just striking drug targets, but also potentially military targets. I'm told that Southcom, Southern Command, has set up cells for developing these strike options, these strike packages, which have then been presented to the president, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, and Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, the president hasn't decided to exercise these options, and our reporting is that the president hasn't decided how far he wants to go, and frankly has reservations about going to full-scale military action there.
So a couple of important key phrases that he just mentioned, right? The first one is the president is being provided options. So he hasn't decided exactly what it is that he wants to do yet. The second very important point that he made was that the president has not yet decided how far he wants to go and that there are some reservations about striking. As we've discussed before, President Trump is peace through strength, right? So as far as power projection right now, I think we're doing a great job of that. When it comes to those land strikes, we have to wait and see exactly what the president's going to decide. But ultimately, I think if we do end up conducting some ground strikes, it's going to be in support of those forces on the ground, the opposition forces that are going to play a key role when it comes to freeing Venezuela. And I think there's a lot of close coordination that's happening with that opposition force on the ground right now. But I really believe that Venezuela is just a starting point for a broader strategic initiative for the United States in that region, especially with the news that the United States has decided to try to reopen a base in Ecuador. And although that seems like a great idea to me, especially since Ecuador is pinned between Colombia and Peru, which are the two greatest cocaine-producing countries, some Ecuadorians are not happy about it. Listen to this.
For these Ecuadorians, the message is clear. It's a firm no to a proposed U.S. military base returning to their country.
No one can hand over our country to foreigners. Our homeland is not for sale.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video right there because I think this is where a lot of countries go wrong when it comes to international relations and international affairs. A lot of the people within, the constituents within that given country, don't necessarily understand international policy. So all they believe is what the politicians tell them, what they hear on the news. And what they hear on the news oftentimes is wrong. All it is what politicians want them to hear. So when they hear about the United States coming there, the first thing that they think about is, well, they're coming to take us over. The United States does not want to go to Ecuador and take over anything, right? We want to occupy the military base there, but we don't want to take over Ecuador for anything. But I don't think Ecuador has that much to offer except for the fact that we can pre-position our forces there for drug addiction. And I've got to be honest with you, when it comes to what that lady was saying, there's one person killed per hour in Ecuador right now. The violence is astronomical. It's one of the most violent countries, if not the most violent country in Latin America. Yet she's saying, well, we don't want America here because they're going to come take us over. That is not the intent. The United States is trying to prevent drugs from flowing into their country. That is it. And to be frank here, I think the people of Ecuador need to focus on what's happening within their country right now. As mentioned previously, it's one of the most violent country, if not the most violent country in Latin America. And a large reason for that is a lack of opportunity. It's the same thing that was happening in El Salvador until President Bukele got there. He started creating opportunity for the young people within the country. That took them away from the only thing that they knew, which was violence, intimidation, engage in horrible activities just to put food on the table. Look, the fact of the matter is that Ecuador is pinned between two of the greatest cocaine-producing countries in the world. Colombia produces about 70% of the world's cocaine. Peru produces about 27% of the world's cocaine. You're talking about over 90% of the world's cocaine being produced on either side of the country. So by default, Ecuador becomes a hub, a storage place for all the drugs that are produced in Colombia and Peru, and ultimately make their way to the United States and to Europe. And if you look at this map again, it's right on the coast. And if you look at where Ecuador is, it's a perfect spot for the United States to engage in interdiction operations because it's right in between those two primary producers of cocaine. You know, those people that were voicing their opinion about the United States going to Ecuador can say whatever they want. But ultimately, it's been reported that the majority of Ecuadorians, about 60% of them, actually want the United States to be there. As a matter of fact, the United States sent Secretary Noem there to take a look at the military base that we had there previously to see its current condition.
Visitando la base de Manta.
Toured the Manta base during a visit by Secretary Noem of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Together with the President and the ministers of the security bloc, we have taken a tour to see what the capabilities are, to see how we can strengthen this cooperation.
When you have a problem that is not just Ecuador's problem, but the whole world's problem, it makes perfect sense to cooperate and face this threat together.
And as a result of Secretary Noem going down to the region and that being looked at as more escalation by the Maduro regime, they've mobilized even more troops. Now they're handing out weapons to the civilians as well. Take a look at this.
President Trump massing warships and troops in the Caribbean. Venezuela is preparing for war. State-run television is now showing volunteers receiving weapons to fight what the country's authoritarian president, Nicolás Maduro, calls American imperialism.
And now it's being reported that helping Maduro's cause, President Petro of Colombia has decided to stop sharing intelligence with American forces, a move that's similar to what the Brits did to us as well. Listen to his reasoning behind it.
A current Colombian military official, a senior official, told me that the most valuable tool that they have to fight against the drug traffickers is intelligence and intelligence sharing. So why would you possibly limit that?
Clave es la inteligencia.
Intelligence is key. The more we coordinate, the better. But intelligence is not for killing, he said.
This obviously sounds like somebody who's lost in the sauce. He's talking about not using intelligence to kill the enemy. That is absolute nonsense. As a matter of fact, when I was in Colombia, the Colombians themselves, their intelligence cell, collected information that was used to kill members of the FARC. So what he's saying right now is absolutely false because they did it when I was there. In other words, if it's convenient for them, they're going to do it. Since it's not convenient for them right now, they're not going to do it. And look, just to go over a couple of things that I mentioned about Petro before. When he was in office, his first year, cocaine production in Colombia went up by 60%. His second year, cocaine production went up by 50%. So you think that he's being complicit in the production of cocaine in his country? Of course he is. Not to the point that Maduro is, right? Because a lot of drugs aren't produced in Venezuela. A lot of them are produced in the neighboring countries, and Venezuela is a hub. But we all know, any person with logic understands what Petro is doing in his country and understands that he's facilitating the production of cocaine in his country. Look, the message for these drug cartels is very simple. The United States is not going to let up. The pressure that's being put on them is only going to get worse. Just listen to what the Secretary of War had to say with relation to what's going on in Latin America right now.
I mean, if you're trafficking drugs to poison the American people, and we know you're from a designated terrorist organization, you're a foreign terrorist and a trafficker, we will find you and we will kill you. No one is better. No one is better at tracking and networking and mapping and hunting than the American military. Honing those skills for many decades in foreign lands. Now we're doing it in defense of the American people with all the authorities. We got lawyers on lawyers. All the authorities necessary to do so, treating these terrorists like the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere.
You know, I think the Secretary of War is exactly right. I think we need to continue to put pressure on these narco-terrorists. Now, I understand that there's a lot of people that are saying, well, these are fishermen that are being hired to push these drugs. They're not necessarily the people that are producing these drugs. Well, let me be clear here. If you are, one of these fishermen that's carrying these drugs from point A to point B, that makes you a drug trafficker. So that means that exactly what the Secretary of War said is going to happen is going to happen. Look, the bottom line on this story is that the United States is not going to let up. The pressure is only going to continue to mount. I'm just curious as to what's going on, within the walls of the White House to see what's going to happen here in the near future. But as these things continue to develop, I'll make sure I keep you guys informed. Whenever I talk to you guys, I tell you that I want to keep you informed on what's happening around the world as well as the United States. And I want to talk to you guys about a story that's making the headlines right now. And it's about something that President Trump said, that we don't have enough talent in this country. And it had to do with the H-1B visa when he was asked a question during an interview. Listen to this.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put
How did we ever do it before?
People can give President Trump as much flack as they want, but he's absolutely right. The United States is lacking when it comes to jobs that rely on people from the STEM field to get done. And a lot of that has to do with the education in this country, which we need to fix. And I'll talk to you guys about that here in a little bit. But we're number 28th out of 37 countries when it comes to mathematics. How is that even possible? In science, we're 12th out of 37th. How is that possible too? Especially since we spend more on education per student than any other country in the world. The U.S. currently spends over $15,000 per student, when the average globally is about $11,300. And when it comes to post-secondary education, the gap is even greater. The United States spends about $37,000 per student, when the rest of the world only spends about $18,000. So I think the president is right when it comes to importing talent from other places to ensure that this country stays strong and it stays competitive in these STEM fields. But it doesn't matter what he says. Whatever he says, people are always going to fall back to Trump derangement syndrome and just spaz out over everything that he says. But every now and then, you're going to find somebody, even though they're a liberal, even though they're from the left, that's going to listen to President Trump and say, you know what, he didn't say that as eloquently as I wanted him to say it, but I completely understand what he's saying. I just understand that it's coming out of his mouth, and that's just the way we got to take it with a grain of salt. So listen to this panelist talk about what President Trump was saying, just say it in a better fashion.
I mean, this is yet another circumstance where the president seems to be having a very difficult time defending his own policies here. And I am someone who's generally in favor of more immigration, who's been very in favor of these H-1B visas, which have been indispensable to the tech industry. It would be great if he had the ability to articulate why these are a good idea right now, why these don't necessarily crowd out American applicants for these jobs, people who want to go seek a higher education in the United States, visiting from abroad, being able to attract the best possible talent from around the world and bring them to American universities to steep them in our culture. Lots of them stay, lots of them create more jobs. This is not a bad policy.
I think by this point, we've all come accustomed to the way that President Trump speaks, and we have to kind of decipher what it is that he's trying to say and understand that. We all know that the president should be very eloquent. He should be very clear on everything that he says. But that's just not President Trump. That's not the way he is. So he is who he is, and we got to kind of put up with it and understand what it is that he's trying to say. However, you are still going to have people that are going to misconstrue whatever it is that he says and try to tell the American people that he's saying something else and take whatever he says completely out of context. So listen to this Clinton White House aide tell you what he understood from what President Trump said. Now, I want you to pay close attention to one of my favorite people in the world, Scott Jennings, and his demeanor when this guy is trying to express what he believed President Trump was trying to say. Listen to this.
No, and it's fascinating because although I completely agree with what you said, I thought it was kind of shocking that he just said, no, you don't. Who was the you you're referring to? The United States? He's referring to the United States as some other entity, as though he's not the president of the United States. The United States doesn't have talented workers. First of all, I agree there are not enough workers here in the United States to be able to do all those jobs. But the president of the United States just said that you, the United States people, don't have enough good, talented people in your country. I'm shocked that if Barack Obama or Joe Biden or any Democrat said that, every Republican conservative would be outraged by that. That just one line. It's the first time I've heard that. It just struck me as being very unusual for any president to say something like that.
Is this guy serious? Come on. These are the type of people that when I watch them, they absolutely just, infuriate me because they have this disdain, this hate for President Trump, that some of the things that they say sometimes make absolutely no sense. And they try to convince the American people that what they're saying makes sense when it makes absolutely no sense. Look, I think the most important part we need to get out of this story is the fact that the United States spends more per student than any other country in the world. It's not even close. Yet our education is not the best in the world. And that has to do a lot with our teachers and the salary that our teachers make, which is pennies, not good. I think that's one of the first things that we need to do. We need to increase teacher pay everywhere across the board to ensure that our teachers are happy and they're doing the best job that they can. We don't only need teachers in our classrooms. We need mentors. We need father figures. We need mother figures. And that's very hard to do when you're an English teacher and you have a class that's, doesn't behave well, that is not well mannered. And then you're expected not only to teach, to be a mentor as well. And teachers understand that that is the expectation, not necessarily the requirement. And a lot of teachers don't think it's worth it. They think it's too much. I'm not getting paid enough for this. So we need to fix our K through 12 education system. We need to put the good teachers in the bad schools. That's where we need the good teachers. That's where we need the innovative teachers. But we all know that wherever there's a bad school, a lot of that school is filled with bad teachers. And we need to fix that because these schools are Title I schools where students are from the lower socioeconomic spectrum. And if we want them to engage in social mobility, we need them to get the best education possible. That's just my belief. That's my understanding. That's what I think needs to happen in order for the United States to become great when it comes to education. As a matter of fact, it's what we need to do if we want to become number one in the world. All right, that completes the show for today. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, share, and let me know what you think in the comments below about the two stories that we covered today. Until next time, stay balanced.